Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Emily Quarles-Mowrer, and I'd like to welcome you all to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. Welcome to all of you who are joining us in our sanctuary this morning. Thank you for coming out on this kind of gray, rainy day and braving the sort of ice storm that they were predicting that didn't quite come through. Welcome to those who are visiting on Zoom, and welcome to those who are visiting sometime in the future. With all the choices we have on Sunday mornings, I'm really glad you chose to come here and be with us. So this morning, our music will be played by Kate Price. And we'd like to send a shout out to Rick Dusky. Thank you for improving technology today. For over 50 years, the UUFP has been a liberal religious voice in the Pottstown area. As UUs, we believe that everyone has a different story we can learn from, and that listening to those who are different from us can teach us as much about ourselves as it does about them. The world is a big place with lots of questions to explore, and the important thing is that we keep an open mind and support one another as we search. But perhaps most importantly, we believe that your search for truth and meaning belongs to you, and that our circle of justice and compassion is big enough for everyone, no matter where you're searching or what questions you need to answer. We hope that your spirit and your heart and your mind are refreshed this morning as we explore the way that our stories are shaped by our understanding of interdependence. We come together this Sunday morning and every Sunday morning, not because we share a creed, but because we share a promise. We promise one another to support each other in our journeys. So our services are really different every week. You should come back to more than one, but the loving kindness we offer here is the same. So whoever you are, wherever you're from, wherever you're viewing us today, we are glad that you're with us. And now it is time for an announcement. So if anyone has an announcement, please feel free to come on up, use the microphone, and to share your name in case people don't know you.
Morning, my name is Clifford, and I'm helping to organize the big annual potluck, which has been postponed from last night to March 15th, which is a Saturday night, and everything else is the same, except the date. So see you there.
Morning, my name is Miranda, and I want to let you know that next week we'll be offering a UU 102 program. And that's a continuation of some information about UUism and a little history of our fellowship. And as well, we have a really fun game to play. So join us if you want, even if you've been a Unitarian for years and years, come and have some fun with us. It's after the service, you go out after the service and get your cookies and coffee, bring it back in the class. Question.
I don't think we're going to have a chance to learn more stories about the UUFP. We can have stories. We light our chalice this morning. We light our chalice this morning with the words of David Breeden. We light this chalice, remembering and honoring our own tradition and celebrating the rich diversity of traditions among us as we search for justice, meaning, and purpose. May we remember that justice, meaning, and purpose live first in deeply listening to one another. Now is the time for our chime. So that same technology that helps to bring the far-flung corners of the world all close together can also distract us from where we are in the here and now. So this is our weekly reminder to be here together Take a nice deep breath. And let it out slowly. And feel the place that we are in the world together. Feel the way that you're sitting in your seat and how your seat supports you and how the earth is supporting the seat. Listen to the small sounds of people being together. Feel the currents of the air as they're stirred by the fans. And listen to the sound of the chime. Our opening words this morning are by Jennifer Kitchen. Come sit by our fire. Come sit by our fire and let us share stories. Let me hear your tales of far-off lands, wanderer, and I will tell you of my travels. Share your experience of the holy with me, worshiper, and I will tell you of what I find divine. Come and stay, lover of leaving, for ours is no caravan of despair, but of hope. We would hear your stories of grief and sorrow as readily as those of joy and laughter, for there's a time and a place and a hearing for all the stories of this world. Stories are the breath and the word for the spirit of life, that power we name love. Come, our fire is warm, we have seats for all. Come, yet again, come, speak to me of what fills your heart, what engages your mind, what resides in your soul. Come, let us worship together. So now is the time for our first hymn, and if you're familiar with our hymnal, you may have recognized some of the words in the opening this morning as being from the Rumi poem that Reverend Lynn Unger put to music as Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Now, Come, Come, Whoever You Are is meant to be sung a cappella as a round. I don't know if we're feeling adventurous enough to do a round this morning, but we can definitely do an a cappella song together. So the words are up here on the side, and we can, do you guys want to go over it once first, or do you just want to jump in? You know it? Okay. All right, so we're going to sing this through 3 times, just as people singing together. All right. Hey, can you give us the first note, please? Okay. And you can stand as you are able and not your spirit. Just because we did so well and it felt like we were missing something, can we do it as a round? Can we split? Okay, you want to lead a half? So do you want to lead the first half? Sure. And I'll lead the second half? Sure. Okay, here we go. Let's do it. Whoever you are, come. for a story. And whether you're young in body or in spirit, you're welcome to join us in the front of the sanctuary if you'd like, but you don't have to. I have one of my younger daughter's favorite books. We actually told the story every night for her entire year of being 3 years old. So. You have anybody who wants to sit up front?
Obviously announcements, I'm sorry. My kids are in Pottsville School District, and if you shop at Giant, from now until the end of March, they're the Giant up in Pottstown on 100. They're doing a price match, so like you can round up at the register. And all of the money that gets rounded up goes to their feeding program, so for kids that have food insecurities in Pottsville. So if you don't want to shop closer to here, there's like 5 minutes up the road, it's another Giant, and you can use our Giant gift cards too, so win-win. Or, sorry.
Is it one thing? It's just the one.
It's just the one Giant, yeah.
The giant down here does that too, but I don't know where to find.
Yeah, this one's for Pottsville, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Story is called The Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig. It's by Eugene Trevizas and illustrated by Helen Oxenberry. And my words are not exactly the same as the words in the book, because after telling it for a full year, I kind of changed the story just a little bit. So, once upon a time, there were 3 cuddly little wolves. One was white, one was gray, and one was black. And one day their mother called the 3 little wolves to her bedside and said, "My dear sweet little children, it is time for you to go out into the world. But beware the big bad pig." And so the 3 little wolves, well, they started off down the road, wandered down the road and walked down the road, and they thought, well, we need a place to settle, so we need to build a house. And just then, they saw a kangaroo who had a big wheelbarrow full of lovely red and yellow bricks. And they said to the kangaroo, "Please, ma'am, may we have some of your bricks so we can build ourselves a house?" And she said, "Well, of course, children." And so she gave them lots and lots and lots of lovely bricks and some slurry concrete to like mix it all together and build it up. And they made a beautiful house, all made of bricks. And the very next day, who should come down the road? Well, Big Bad Pig came prowling down the road, and he saw the house that the little wolves had built. And he came up to their little house. Well, they were outside playing cricket. And came up to their house and said, little wolves, let me come in." And they said, "No, no, no. By the hair in our chinny chins, we will not let you in. Not for all the tea in our little china teapot." And the pig said, "Well, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in." Well, he huffed and he puffed, but he couldn't blow the house in. So he got a sledgehammer. And he knocked down that house, and those poor little wolves barely escaped with their tiny china teapot. So the 3 little wolves went prowling down the road again, and they were walking and walking and walking, and they thought, well, we need to have a house. And so they came across a beaver who was mixing concrete in a concrete mixer. And they said to the beaver, "Please, Mr. Beaver, can we have some of your concrete so we can build ourselves a house?" And the beaver said, "Why, certainly." And gave them some lovely slurry concrete so that they could mix it up together and build an extremely strong house. Well, no sooner had they finished then who should come prowling down the road? The big bad pig came prowling down the road, and he saw the house of concrete that the little wolves had built. And the wolves were out in the back garden and they were playing some tennis. And when they saw that big bad pig, well, they went running into their house and they closed their door as fast as they could. And the pig came and rang their doorbell and said, little wolves, let me come in. Wolves said, no, not by the hairs on our chins, we will not let you in, not for all the tea in our little china teapot. And the pig said, well, then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in. Well, he huffed, and he puffed, but the house didn't blow over. It's made of concrete. So he got out a pneumatic jackhammer. And he knocked down their house. It was just a pile of rubble. They barely escaped with their little china teapot. And they went walking down the road and they said, we need to build an even stronger house. Well, just then they saw a rhinoceros who was driving a truck that was full of steel plates and barbed wire, some rivets, some plexiglass, all those good things. And they said, please, sir, will you give us some of our barbed wire, a few iron bars, iron plates, and some heavy metal padlocks? Sure, said the rhinoceros. And because he was a very kind rhinoceros, he also gave them plexiglass for their windows. Bulletproof, of course. And so the little wolves made a new house. It was the biggest, strongest house you could imagine. It was very safe and very secure and had 17 locks on the door. And the very next day, the big bad pig prowling down the road, and he saw the very extremely strong house that the little pigs had built. Now they were out in the backyard playing some hopscotch, but as soon as they saw that pig coming by, well, they ran into their house and they locked all 17 of their padlocks. And so the pig came up to their video entrance phone and he said, little wolves, let me come in. And they said, no, by the hair on our chins, we will not let you in, not for all the tea leaves in our little china teapot. Well, you know what happened then. Well, he huffed, and he puffed, but the house, it didn't blow in. So he got some dynamite, and he blew up their house, kaboom! Now they barely escaped with that little tiny teapot. He just managed to barely escape, and he said, something must be wrong with our building materials. So they went walking down the road and walking down the road and walking down the road, and then they came across a flamingo. And she was selling flowers, and they said, please, Miss Flamingo, can we have some of your flowers so we can build ourselves a house? And she said, why, of course. And so they built themselves a house of flowers. They had a wall that was made of marigolds and a wall that was made of daffodils. And there was one of pink roses and one of cherry blossoms. The ceiling was made of sunflowers and the floor was carpet of daisies. They even had water lilies in their bathtub and buttercups in their refrigerator. Wow. Well, the next day, who should come prowling down the road? The big bad pig came prowling down the road, and he saw the house that the little wolves had built. What do you think's gonna happen? Oh, let's find out. So, Well, the pig rang the blue bell at the door.
Little wolves, let me come in.
It said, no, 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 I'm here to chitty chit chits, we will not let you in, not for all the tea in our little tiny teapot. Well, Big Bad Pig wasn't gonna stand for that, so he huffed. And then he took another deep breath. And the flowers smelled wonderful. And he took another deep breath. And another. And he realized that he didn't have to blow down their house. He could be a big, good pig. So he rang their doorbell again and he said, little wolves, would you like to share some tea in a little china teapot? Now, at first, the little wolves did not exactly believe that he was a good pig. But they realized that the pig had changed. So soon they came running out of the house and they played pig pong and then piggy in the middle. And when they were all tired, they invited him into the house and they offered him tea and strawberries and wolfberries and let him stay as long as he wanted. Well, now is the time in our service where we pause for our morning offering. I can feel a little bit awkward at the offering, like I'm gonna launch into the WHYY offering. I can't help it without your support. But it's true, it can't happen without your support. All that we do here, all that we are here, all that we bring to our community, that's all because of all of you. All of you deciding that this is a great cause to support and that this is a community that you care about. So let's have our morning offering. Thank you so much, everyone. The offering is given in the spirit of generosity and was received with so much love and gratitude. Thank you. All right, so today I have a reading. It's not as long as the Little Wolf and Big Bad Pig. It's called We Can Never Know by J.E. Abernathy Jr. How can we begin to understand what hope and healing mean in the face of a deadly illness with no known cure? We have many sources of hope in our healing in our lives, singing and praying and thinking and communicating and acting, giving and remembering. Dr. Richard Cabot tells the story of a young theological student in clinical pastoral education who was encountering for the first time in his life a patient whose illness was so severe that doctors told the student that this woman had a very slim chance of survival. Well, the woman asked the young man to pray for her. And in this first encounter with such a request, the student minister was overwhelmed with feelings of inadequacy and despair. He turned away from the bedside and buried his face in his hands. He fought back the tears and tried to regain control of his emotions. And when he finally got himself together, he stood up, embarrassed and ashamed. He took the woman's hand. He offered a simple blessing and a goodbye, and he fled from the room. Well, much to the surprise of the clinicians, the woman underwent an unexpected recovery. And when Dr. Cabot was talking with her later about how she was able to rally and respond so well, she replied, I think it all began with that young theological student who was so intense in his prayers for me. We can never be sure of how our companionship and service in the company of those living with serious illness will be an agent of hope and healing. Sometimes the things that we think aren't going to be remembered at all, or were useless, or we felt disappointed in, sometimes those things will be the most helpful and the most remembered. So please remain seated as we sing Voice Still and Small together. It's number 391 in the Gray Hymnal, and the words are up on the screen. Taken to heart. We live in a sea of stories. You turn on the news, you turn on your streaming service, you open a book, you open a newspaper, you open a magazine, you download a podcast. It's inescapable. There's stories everywhere. Even more literally than that, our brains are creating stories from everything around us. Many of us have what's called an inner monologue, where, according to Dr. Kyle D. Killian, writing for Psychology Today, when we acquire our language and social skills as children, many of us also acquire an inner voice that talks to us in words and helps us to rehearse things that we need to do, or that we need to say, or that we need to remember. And it's literally telling us the story of each day. Now, not everybody has that. It's somewhere between 30 and 50% of people that have a literal voice in their heads, but almost everyone has a way of telling stories through imagery and through scent and sound, touch. We don't just hear our stories, we experience our stories. Dr. Killian said, I know people who have internal dialogues and think in words all the time. I know a person who has internal and external dialogues with himself, engaging in rich conversations that can lead in unexpected and even challenging directions. I can imagine that sounds weird to folks who have only an inner monologue, or those who have no inner monologue at all. But as Vulcan philosophy states, infinite diversity in infinite combinations, which is another way of saying different strokes for different folks. And empathy, perspective taking, and imagining what others' experiences are like and what's inside their heads are worthwhile, growth-enhancing, humanizing exercises. I thought it was really interesting that Dr. Killian's mind went immediately to Star Trek, because when thinking about stories, my mind went immediately to the takeoff on Star Trek, Galaxy Quest. In case you haven't seen that, it was like a movie in the 90s that was about these actors who were supposed to be kind of like the Star Trek actors, who were abducted by aliens who came to Earth to get some help because Earthlings had a very advanced civilization and they needed help with another race of aliens that was going to try to conquer them. They did not have any concept of stories as fiction. The only concept they had was stories as history. So in their minds, this Star Trek thing was actual history, that humans had encountered all of these other races already. Whereas all of these human actors were like, yeah, how does the ship work? I just tell it what to do. Now, actually, that kind of probably sounds familiar to people who have been experimenting with AI. You just tell it what to do. But you know, sometimes we get to choose the stories that we're consuming. Sometimes we say, hey, I want to watch an action movie. Or like for me, I love reading and I love choosing the story. I know that no matter what I personally choose, it'll be something with a happy ending. So like the daring sleuth will figure out the crime, or the couple will overcome their hardships and end up together, or the plucky misfits save the world. And you know, maybe it was because I was raised on sitcoms where every problem can be solved in 20 minutes with a word from a wise parental figure. Or maybe it was because of G.I. Joe, where knowing is half the battle. I'm addicted to things working out right in the end. But you know, stories, even fictional stories, are really important because they expose us to people and places that we would otherwise never see or meet. How many of you learned about the Holocaust by reading about Anne Frank? Yeah. My younger daughter just finished a project on the Holocaust, and that was one of the books she read, was that story. And God willing, none of us will ever experience that directly. But how powerful is it to know from a first person point of view what that was like? And how important it is that that person lives on. It's someone we'll never meet in person, but it's somebody we know, all of us know personally. And that's true also of fictional characters. You know, how many of us know the gang from Cheers? I'm dating myself so hard right now. But you know, I will never meet Norm. And yet, if somebody walks into a bar in it's set in Boston, right? Yeah. Somebody walks into a bar in Boston and says, Norm, I'll be looking around for Norm, the mailman. These are all people that we get exposed to who feel like our friends, even though they don't really exist. But they're also people who expand our horizons, even though they don't really exist. Or maybe they do exist because we all agree that they're people. What do you think of that? So I've been thinking about stories a lot because my older daughter just went through the high school application process. And I'm thinking to myself, really, high school applications? Because when I went to high school, you just showed up. That was the whole application. Walk through the door and go to your classroom. But she actually had to fill out 4 essays and a bunch of different paperwork and do an interview at every school. She had a big process. It was like what I remember from applying to college. And one of her essays, so I'm going to tell you the story of a couple of her essays. So one of her essays was about a time when you feel like you had a challenge. And she had a really tough time coming up with a story where she felt challenged because she's like, Mom, my life is so easy. Have you heard the news? But that made me think about my application process when I was applying to colleges. And when I was applying to colleges, I thought of myself as pretty privileged. I came from a middle-class background. Both my parents went to college. My mother had an advanced degree. We owned our own house, we owned our own car. We always had food to eat. We always had new clothes when we needed them. I was able to take voice lessons. My sister was able to take dance lessons. When I had a job, that money that I made was just for me to spend however I wanted, mostly on Sour Patch Kids. Seriously, I bought so many Sour Patch Kids, I actually ripped off the layer of my tongue. That was painful and I kept eating them. Who knows? But I'm betting that when the college admissions officers read my story, their thoughts lingered on different things. My father died when I was 9. I was raised by a single parent. My mother never remarried. My mother was a minister, and although that's a degree, you have to have an advanced degree to be a minister, you have to go through a lot of schooling. It's not a high-paid, high-powered job. And she wasn't in a settled ministry when I was applying to college. I remember that she was trying to start a church, and also that she had other odd jobs on the side. Like, there was a time where she was working for a company that asked people to take surveys. It was a market research company. And I remember her asking people, like calling people up to ask them about fish sticks and pasta sauce. Yeah, remember when you could call people on the phone and they'd pick up? Also dating myself. But just because I saw my life as one of comfort and ease, didn't mean that the college admissions board didn't see my life as full of struggle and tragedy. Now, I read the story of the 3 little pigs today because it's important to remember the perspective of the person or the wolf who's telling the story. I mean, usually when we hear this story, we'll hear it from the perspective of 3 little pigs instead. And a lot of times the wolf is successful in blowing over their house. And then the pigs get their vengeance by enticing the wolf to like come down the chimney, and then they boil it in a pot and eat it. And like, what kind of message is that for children? I mean, I've read other ones to my kids too. They like, there's one where the 3 little pigs they're ninja pigs. And so the first ninja pig only gets to white belt before they give up. And then the second ninja pig gets to a brown belt and then gives up. And the third ninja pig becomes a black belt and scares off the big bad wolf and starts a studio. I mean, that's a better message, but I really like this message, which is, this is the way I hear it. And, we all hear our stories different ways, but the way I hear this one is, we can try to hide and hide and hide and make things harder and harder and harder to get along. But sometimes if we take a chance and we're soft instead of being hard, sometimes it has better outcomes. And that's a really hard message for this particular time in our democracy. Like, one of the reasons that things feel hard to me right now is that when I'm paying attention to the wider world, I don't have that assurance that things will work out right in the end. I'm happier reading my romance novels where I know that even though they break up at about 80% of the book, every time it's 80%, look it up. They'll get back together and everything will be good, at least all the way up until the 3rd epilogue, at which point they finally give up on writing epilogues. We know that there's this long arc of history, but sometimes it doesn't feel like that long arc is bending towards justice. And my husband is listening to all these history podcasts, and I feel like we're repeating that history, but maybe we're repeating it a little worse. But I can't help but wonder what kind of story. Oh, thank you so much. We can't help but wonder what kind of stories historians in the future are going to tell about when we are living now. That ancient curse, may you live in interesting times. I think we've all been cursed. So that brings me to my daughter's other essay that she wrote. She wrote an essay that talked about her favorite book series right now, which is Percy Jackson and the Olympians. It's this story about this like, if you've ever heard, Rick Riordan, he's the author, tell about why he wrote this book. He has a son who has a learning disability, and he wanted his son to feel like he could be a hero. So he wrote a story about a hero who had the same disabilities. And Lorelai really latched onto this story, I think because there's a Disney show about it right now that's like been really well received. But she really latched onto this story and how people can make different choices. And there's one character, Percy, who's the main character, who makes the choice every single time to try to do what he thinks is right. And then there's another character whose name is Luke, who also is making a choice to try to do what he thinks is right. But their choices are different and are diametrically opposed. And the thing that she took away from that story was, you can be doing what you think is right, but if there's more information that comes out and you find out that what you were doing isn't as right as you thought, you still have time to change your story. And that's what she took from it. She took that you can always change, that you always have the chance to become a hero. That second character, well, even though he was the villain for about 90% of the story, at the end, he figured out that, oh my gosh, I've been lied to this whole time. And he sacrificed himself so that everyone else could live. You can always change your story. It doesn't always have to be a sacrifice like a melodramatic kids show, but you can always change your story. You can always make a new choice, because as long as we have breath, we have choices. So that's what I really wanted to say today. That was pretty much the takeaway message, that we have choices, that even though things seem dark right now, I mean, maybe not to everyone. I happen to be in the camp that feels really oppressed right now. But you know, my husband was talking to his dad yesterday, and his dad doesn't feel oppressed. His dad feels like things are changing in a way that's okay. And I love his dad. He's a really, really good person, but I don't think he understands. And I don't think that he's hearing the same stories that I am. And that's another way that stories really matter. We live in a country right now where stories and facts seem to be separate depending on where your stories come from and what people are focusing on. And, you know, just like the Three Little Wolves, sometimes we need to make room in our hearts to hear the story of someone else and to let them have, to be open and to be soft for someone else's story. It doesn't mean that they can come in and blow down our house and we'll just be okay with that. But it does mean that we can't be building up our walls so high that we never give them a chance. So stories, they're really important, and the way that we tell them really makes a difference. And that's what I wanted everyone to take this time. So now is the time when we will sing our last hymn of the day. It's hymn number 295, Sing Out Praises for the Journey.
Search
now is the time where we have a little bit of time to share our joys and our sorrows and our reflections. The recording is all. Please join me in reading our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this chalice flame, but not the light of wisdom, the warmth of the community, or the fire of the commitment. These we carry in our hearts and in our hands until we are together again. We close today with the words of Carrie Holly Hurt. Love holds you. Love bears witness to all your inherent dignity and worthiness. It witnesses how you try, succeed, and fail, and it does not flinch. Love will not let you go. Love holds all of you. Amen. Shalom, salam, blessed be. And please join us outside to have potluck and some lovely treats.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yes, we got Yes.
You're at the bottom of the ground.
I tried to make
Keep going. Oh, it's-
Yeah.